We've got a lot to talk about tonight, so we're probably just going to jump right into the book. But I am curious if you've been to any of the countries in this book, and how you found the depiction of these countries, as viewed from a bicycle, versus any experience you would have had. So as we go through the book, would love to hear your thoughts on that. Wendy and I were both saying we found this one a little hard to read, but still enjoyed it, and just found it, some of the history and the current and kind of the bouncing back and forth and that kind of thing. So the discussion questions are interesting. So we'll get into those in a minute. And I did communicate with Kate Harris, and I want to thank any of you that made a donation tonight. We're going to make donations to, at her request, a group called PEN International, which supports freedom of the press. So thank you for that. Wendy, are you like in action? Are you still working?
No, I can talk and be in action at the same time. Okay. So my camera. So forgive me, ladies. I will hopefully be in you'll hopefully see my lovely face sooner or later. But might as well get started. First of all, a little bit about the author. Kate Harris is a writer and an adventurer, and she's been named one of Canada's top explorers. And which I think is interesting that, they're not saying her necessarily her writing, but she's it's because of her travel writing, but she's been all over in terms of travel writing. As you found out from the book, she has a degree in science from MIT, the University of North Carolina, and then she received, she also did a history of science in Oxford. She currently deals with a lot of UN environmental negotiations, and she lives off the grid in a log cabin on the border of Yucatan and British Columbia and Alaska. So she is truly a woman who lives her own life, that's for sure. And for those of you who are interested, I will put in the chat a couple of videos that are of this trip. One of them was when her trip in 2006, which was the first part of the book, and another is from 2011. And they're mainly just scenery as she's riding along. There's not a lot of, discussion. It's just sort of the view from the bike. But I'll put those in the chat later on. She says in one of her talking about herself, she says, I'm a writer with a knack for getting lost and a grudge against borders. She's very much against borders. And we'll explore that a little bit. Hold on, I just need to sign in here. But she says her main adventure these days is staying off grid. This was her first book. She's working on a second. So when I was reading the book, I did find it a little more difficult, maybe because it's just not my type of book, even though I was one of the people that recommended it. I'm going to read a comment that someone had written about the book, and it says, and I tend to agree with it. She says, there seems to be a total disconnect and a lack of interest by the author when it comes to local people, culture, and way of life. Mm-hmm. Instead of diving into this human side of the Silk Road, she focuses on certain historical aspects, technicalities of trip planning and logistics, and repeatedly referencing her academic background, which quickly became boring. And when I read that comment, I realized that's probably what I felt was missing from this book, is I wanted to see more of her interactions with people. And I found the sections of the book where she was interacting, I really enjoyed. But I tended to get a little bit lost along the way as she was traveling and just talking about traveling. I guess. But in terms of my favorite quote, or my favorite section was a quote where she says, "At what point was I running away from life? And at what point was I running towards it?" And she calls that the understanding, the distinction between the two is very crucial and troubling. And I liked it because I remember for myself years ago, like as a teenager, I had thought about running away and I was writing about it in my journal. And I decided, I can remember sitting at the side of the road, thinking about running away. I was going to go to California. This was, in the 60s. I was going to go be a flower child in Haight-Ashbury. And what stopped me was I realized my parents would not understand that I was not running away from them. I was running towards something else. And that distinction for me is it's a very real distinction. So when she brought this up in her book, I thought, I can remember that feeling. And I still do from time to time. Am I running away from something or am I running towards something? Am I trying to get rid of the old or am I wanting to experience the new? And which one of those is really pulling me? So that was my favorite section of the book. So other people, let's see what kind of parts did any of you like? And that will give me a chance to sign into my other computer. So yes.
By the way, just wave or put your hand up. We don't want to miss anybody's comments in this. It's hard,
particularly because we have so many viewers that I may miss you if you're on the second page, so I'll try to back and forth. Okay, so but Mary, you had your hand up. Mary Burke.
Is there just one of us? Okay, sometimes there's two. Well, like you said, Wendy, the parts where she was personally interacting with people were my favorite parts. So the one where this is where she is in Uzbekistan, and she says, the mother of four who ran the restaurant invited Mel and me to spend the night and even offered to wash our hair by hand with a bucket, hair that hadn't seen anything but dust and sweat and the inside of a helmet for more than a week. Of all the hospitable gestures we met along the Silk Road, this was my favorite. So I think also because I heard the dust in the sweat and the grime, it's like I could feel that cleansing of the hair, plus the human interaction, and thinking of how many times all of us who have traveled have felt the kindness of strangers. So I felt the connection there.
Good. Okay. Someone else. Is that Lucretia? Did you raise your hand? No.
Did you? Yes, I think I did. I did. I lived in China a couple of years. And so when she was writing about the new experiences each day, that really resonated with me because no day was like the one before. And there was always something new happening, something unexpected, perhaps a kindness, perhaps something just very different culturally. Mm-hmm. So I really enjoyed the adventuresomeness of the book.
Okay. And see someone else. I think I saw, Mary Chappelle.
Nancy.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Nancy Chappelle.
Well, I read some reviews about the book too before I dug in, and I'm on Goodreads, so I read some of those. And yes, I remember someone criticizing it because she just wasn't into people. And when I travel, I am a people person, and I watch and I talk to everybody and blah blah blah. But I respected the fact that she wasn't pretending to be somebody she wasn't, and I did appreciate the history and the geography as she traveled. And I can barely ride a bicycle for 5 miles, so I'm just so wowed by people that can do that and be dirty and be hot and be cold and do mountains, for goodness sakes. So I think, she's a scientist. I wouldn't expect her necessarily to be out there looking to have conversations. You could tell she was a lot more introverted than her friend Mel, because Mel was the one who mostly interacted with people. So she would often slink off by herself or something. But me, that was kind of fine. I still like the book. I have 40 pages left to read. I did epilogue, but I didn't quite get through it. But I found it pretty interesting, and I'm very intrigued by Central Asia and never been there. I've been to Moscow once, but nothing like that. And it looks so bleak. And yeah, you know, I appreciated, she did say Tajikistan being one of the poorest countries, certainly in Central Asia, and the people were kind. So I think she had, you know, some human elements to her, but, you know, I think she says that she goes kind of as a scientist, and I was fine with all that. I like history. I like geography.
You know, one thing also that I noted is that in the area, in the section when she was traveling, I think through some of the stands where she wasn't meeting people, and it seemed like all she talked about was the ride. But one of the things I realized is that that's probably what it was like. There, in a lot of that area, there just isn't a lot of built up. You are going for days and days without seeing anyone, and so to be able to think to yourself, you know, many of you have probably done it in your car if you've been on a long distance trip. You think to yourself, you look at the scenery, and so I think that's kind of what it was like on the bike. It's, you know, when that's what you have in front of you, that's what you're going to think and talk about. So I thought it was appropriate. Yes, Lori.
I wrote in the thing that I am a cyclist. In fact, I have one of my pictures from a bike tour, and that's a thing when you you know, I really got into it. I don't ride and carry my tent. I have people do that, and then, you know, and then I ride. But when you're on a bike, you really experience the physical location and the ups and downs, and, you know, the weather and everything like that. And that's a large part of the travel, in addition to meeting the other people. But a lot of it was it was pretty isolated. I have several quotes that I really liked, but one of it was, "No road was long enough to learn all I wanted to know and get where I wanted to go." You know, she was definitely searching, and, you know, and she was trying, you know, going through this, and she had been, I read a lot about her because I thought it was really fascinating. And, you know, she had been, you know, done 2 different tours. And so anyway, I really enjoyed the book, and I understood her mindset.
I think it's one of the things you brought. Oh, yes. Katie. Katie Hurst? Or Kathy Hurst. Kathy.
Hi. The author's parents live near me, and she gave a presentation at the local cinema. So I had quite high hopes for the book, but they weren't fulfilled. I like travel books to find out what the places are like. And she didn't enlighten us much about the history or the culture. I've been to Uzbekistan, and one of the major sites in Uzbekistan is a museum of banned Soviet art in Nukus in the west of Uzbekistan. And she biked right through there, and she didn't even mention the Museum of Banned Soviet Art. And that was so important. On our tour, we flew there just to see it.
Interesting. And other than that, did you see or feel some of the places other than that? I mean, in terms of her feeling about the country, or
no, I didn't get a sense of any much differentiation between the countries, to tell you the truth.
Okay. Right. Jane.
Wendy, when you said recently you get in a car and you're going on a trip, but you stop and you have lunch and you talk to people and you stay overnight and you maybe go to a restaurant or a bar and you talk to people. That last third of the trip, I mean, they were going incognito in their masks and things. They couldn't talk to people. I don't find that a traveling. That's a slog. They slogged. I didn't feel good about their trip at all.
Well, I think, and let me just see if there's anybody on the other page that has a comment for Any other comments over here? Yeah, okay. So one of the things that I think it relates also to the being a bicycle. So one of the questions that I had was, in terms of the travel, why there are so many different ways that one can travel. Why do you think she chose a bicycle as her method of travel? And in fact, I think, just see, as Lori pointed out, if you are a biker, part of the trip is the travel on the bike, and it is that slog. So, but why do you think she may have chosen a bicycle as her mode? I think I saw a hand over here. Thoughts on choosing a bike as opposed to a bus? Yeah.
I think she's an athlete, and it was a physical feat.
Okay.
That's why she describes the biking experience so much rather than the countries that she was in.
Slow travel is very different from traveling on a bus or on a plane or on a car. And it's just you and whatever's immediately around you. So it's very different.
Yep.
Yeah, I actually, okay, well, first of all, I do agree with that sentiment that it is a slower form of travel where you actually you're more present in your surroundings and in a different way maybe than what maybe you would find in other ways of travel. But I actually really resonated with her as a person because, my background is also scientific and data oriented. And I actually, for a period of my life, thought I might want to be an astronaut, and I was really interested in space. Now I'm more interested in other aspects, like oceans is now what my discipline, ocean data. But, I have that personal background of that interest. And so I kind of actually liked her reminiscences on those fronts and kind of self-reflections that she was doing as she went along. And I also resonate with the idea, like for me, also landscape is really important in my traveling. I love road trips. I've been to some of those places. I've been to Turkey and Kazakhstan. I was disappointed that I spent 2.5 weeks around Almaty in Kazakhstan, and there's quite a bit of interesting stuff there. And she really didn't talk about anything in Almaty when she was there, but so there are maybe some issues with that. But generally speaking, I really liked this focus on the terrain and this appreciation of people that go into maybe difficult terrains and seeing those with your own eyes. I did appreciate that.
Okay, good. Other comments? Yeah, Shirley.
Me?
Yeah, Shirley.
Okay. Okay. I thought it was a really interesting to read about her perspective traveling on a bicycle. And I think one of the reasons that she chose that method, beyond the fact that, it was less expensive than lots of other ways to travel, but was because of her interest in science and trying to see things up close, as well as her introspective approach. She was really kind of find herself and trying to find out where she fit in and what was the universe all about. And I think traveling that way gives you a chance to slow down and just really appreciate what's right in front of you. I only had a chance to read the first part of the book, but I'm going to finish it, and I'm really enjoying it because I think she's an interesting writer. I like some of her just her metaphoric approach to some of the experiences that she'd had and so on. But I watched the little video film, and I don't know whether others did, but it's something to see too that was on the JourneyWoman site. Just at the bottom, there's the movie there, the YouTube film that they made, and it was really interesting to see. And you just see that the landscape goes on and on forever, you know, and it's just, it's the same. So you really have a lot of opportunity to sort of just figure out who you are and figure out where you're going and what's important and what's not and all those things. So I didn't think her travel book was in a traditional sense trying to educate others about, you know, what these places are. That wasn't really so much important as just that overall, I don't know, existential way of looking at travel.
And I think there was a Julie. I thought I saw somebody.
Shirley.
Okay. When you're traveling by bike, people approach you easier than if you're in a bus or in a car. You're very approachable that way. I didn't feel this was a travel log. It's more of a challenge log. Because she could have done this anywhere really, because it didn't really matter. It was just, and I kept thinking, why would you do this to yourself? I'd rather read about it than live it. And I mean, I've had some strange adventures, but that was a little overboard.
One of the things she said is she started the book by saying that she felt she was born centuries too late for the life I was meant to live. And what do you think prompted that? And do you think we've reached the limits of physical exploration on Earth?
I just want to say I was born too late as well, but I would not have chosen that as my journey for sure.
And I think our oceanographer might have something to say about worlds to explore on Earth. Yes.
Yeah, that's just what I was thinking. It's like, yeah, at least in the oceanographic context, there's still quite a lot to explore. And I would also say on land too, especially like underground and cave systems and whatnot. There's still a lot unknown territory on this planet. Yeah.
You know, one of the things that she had was this obsession with Mars, right? And that really fueled a lot of her travel and a lot of what she was wanting to do, and really got her started on her journeys, at least mentally. Have any of you had an obsession about a place that you dream of so much, or do you have a place that you dream of so much that it's you're almost obsessive about it? Where are the places that you really think about and want to go? Thoughts on that?
India.
India, okay.
Kazakhstan.
A Stan, yes.
I really want to see the Republic of Georgia.
Oh. I've been thinking Greece for years, so that's one place I would like to go. Although I would like to see some of the more recently I've wanted to see some of Eastern Europe, but Greece has been on my list for years, but not to the obsessiveness that she was with Mars.
Tibet for me.
Tibet. Oh,
I read several books about Tibet, and my heart goes out to the Tibetan people, and and how China has blatantly lied about what they did. So reading their history, and I've gotten to know a few and taught some Tibetan people, and they're so peaceful and gentle. So that has always been on my bucket list. Certainly not an easy trip, but I was in Nepal, and a lot of the people I met there were Tibetan refugees. They're not able to go home or live in their country. So my heart always goes out to people who can't live where they want to, and not their own choice, but circumstances beyond their thing. I'm just so I've got my video off after because I'm having dinner. So after I stop talking, I put it on.
Yes.
So you don't see me slurping and eating away.
Other people have obsessions about going someplace, a specific place in mind.
Mine wasn't a specific place. I wanted to be in the Peace Corps. And it took me 35 years, but I finally made it into the Peace Corps.
Oh, good.
So I guess it was an obsession if it lasted that long.
Right, right. And Peggy.
And that was to Ukraine.
Yeah, so
Ukraine
my
was great.
obsession, sorry.
Where were you?
That was in
my-
Ukraine. After I
Ukraine.
retired.
Mhm.
Excellent.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
Okay, now you can go.
Okay. My obsession is with the terracotta soldiers in China.
Ah.
I am dying to see those.
I've seen those, yes.
Well
I-
worth it.
I will tell you, I when I was in China, I went to see the terracotta soldiers, and I also for years had wanted to, because I still remember to this day when they were on the cover of Life magazine back in the 70s when they were first discovered, and I remember seeing it and thinking I want to go, but of course my parents told me I would never be able to go to China, so that's the way it was. And when I finally got to see them, I was a little disappointed, not in them, but that it was so crowded and so many people. I wanted to be able to just go and look, but I mean, it was like we were packed like sardines, about 20 deep, and I was kind of like, kind of doing, well, you can't see, I'm sort of trying to dip and dive to try to see little pieces of them. So if you get to go, try to go at a time when not as many people are there.
Because that was not my experience. I saw them too a number of years ago, about 7 or 8 years ago, and it was just very awing, it's just overwhelming to see and we had taken the train to Xi'an to see the terracotta soldiers, and my experience on the train was really amazing too, because it was like about a 15-hour ride on this train that was just going all through the night, and we were packed into these little cabins. I think there were 8 people in one with bunks on the side, and if you sat on the edge of the seat, your knees were touching the people on the other side. You didn't know them at all, and they didn't speak your language. Everybody was Chinese except for us, and we went through that, and then we had to get off the train. It was 5 o'clock in the morning, and it was pitch black dark. It was a very exciting and very, very intense, dramatic time. But anyway, the experience, seeing the soldiers, although it was just amazing. I thought it was an amazing experience. So I think it's worthwhile trying to get there.
Oh, for sure.
I'm
Linda.
working on it.
Can I just say that you guys are all altruistic and everything? I want to go to the Republic of Georgia because I want to see the terracotta wine vats buried in the dirt with a small hole at the top.
Cheers to that.
Sounds good.
That's great.
The wine in Georgia is worth the trip.
Is it? Yeah, I need to go.
And the tea.
Uzbekistan is mine. I'm particularly interested in seeing the Museum of Forbidden Arts in Nautilus, which someone spoke about earlier.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Yes,
Anyone
I
else?
did. It's fabulous. And
Yes,
it started out as a little wood house, but I think the government has built a beautiful new modern big building to house it.
yes. Well, my interest started off in Samarkand and doing some other pieces of the Silk Road, which I've done some of in Turkey and in Iran. But the more I read about Uzbekistan, and I saw a little video somewhere of art from the Museum of Forbidden Art, and it's intrigued me a great deal, yes.
Uzbekistan is a great place to go. It's just got so much. The beautiful tiled mosques are like what they have in Persia or Iran. And there's all these crafts and
yes, it looks fabulous.
Yeah. The food's no hell.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
There
the
on your
food's
own.
important.
One of the things that Kate speaks about is her desire of a world without borders. And she says, which it's meant believing in hearts and minds without them. Is it possible, and is it really desirable? And what would it be like to be in a land without borders? How much openness can survive the darker impulses of human nature? And one of the things about that particular question that strikes me, a few years, well, it's been probably 5 years ago, I spent the summer in Taiwan, and I went to a conference while I was there, and I had a roommate from Azerbaijan. And I didn't know much about Azerbaijan at the time. And so I asked her, I said, well, are there very many Azerbaijanis in other countries? And she said, well, we don't believe in those national borders. An Azerbaijani is an Azerbaijani no matter where they live in the world. And the border was put in by someone else, that the geopolitical borders have nothing to do with being an Azerbaijani. And I thought that was kind of an interesting philosophy or take. She's from that region of the stands, because Azerbaijan is there as well. But the fact that borders have been put in place by geopolitical, it has nothing to do with the people, is one thought, as opposed to nationalism that we see in other places. So what are your thoughts about borders? And can we have a borderless area or not? And I don't want to, let me preface this by saying, let's not get 21st century political about it. This is more a philosophical discussion. Okay, Diane.
I'm single, dysfunctional family, very little contact with my family, relatives in another far, far away. So I am kind of an island. I have some very good friends. When I travel, I'm a teacher. Canadian is a huge part of my identity. Not that I'm political. I really try to get out of political stuff when I travel, but it is my identity. I was also born July 1st, but it's more that it is a sense of belonging. For some people, their family is number one, and I commend them, and I would hope that I would have that, but I won't, and I never will. So my country is big for me. I'm traveling, and if I meet someone from Canada with a Canadian flag, it's just, you're Canadian, isn't that lovely? So for me, not political, nothing to do with any of that. It is that sense of belonging that, for me, on a very personal note, is important.
Other thoughts about borders?
Well, I did live in Belfast in Northern Ireland for 3 years. And so there's a particular border that you kind of often would like to not see. Like, I don't know, like that's how I was. So I feel like there are a lot of arbitrary borders. I don't know if people could, somehow democratically choose their own borders, or, what about the Poles and the Germans and the Hungarians who, maybe Polish and then they're German and then they're not. And then, and certainly that's in Central Asia. I mean, she told us in the book that Samarkand, or however, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, is actually a Tajik kind of place, but it was, sort of, the border was changed and now it's part of Uzbekistan, but it was basically something of another culture's people. And so I have a hard time with a lot of the borders, and, having studied that somehow in 1895, Europe decided the borders of Africa, and where's that gotten us? So anyway, I won't get too political about it, but there's an awful lot of borders that are unnecessary and shouldn't have been there, in my view.
So I think Diana, you brought up a really good point in terms of one's identity and one's culture. But is that, in today's world, yes, we use a country to say that. But for example, somebody from Newfoundland has a very different sense of who they are versus somebody from Vancouver versus somebody from Ontario. You have different cultures in each of these three regions, right? And I think when you get over into areas where there are, and we're kind of different between the United States and Canada. We're such large expanses of land. That's all one country. But when you get over into Eastern Europe, Western Europe, where there's just small borders, I mean, they're much smaller sections that are much more localized than we have in North America. So I don't know, just a thought in terms of when you cross the street from one town to another and happen to be in a different country, what has really changed? You know,
and when you think about the Middle East and how many of the borders there were drawn up by one English woman, and you know, in Africa too, the borders are so often so arbitrary and not necessarily drawn up for the benefit of the people there.
I would say, for example, in Nigeria, where northern and southern Nigeria have very distinct cultures that are very different from each other. And, you know, if there was to be a border, wouldn't it make more sense to have them two separate by their cultures as opposed to drawing a circle around the entire thing?
But often it's not about cultures, it's about resources, especially in the Middle East, where it's about who's got the water, you know? It's about water. It's not about anything else. And that's why we have borders, you know, who's got the water?
And I think also in the Middle East, it was also about which families the British felt comfortable dealing with. And so they drew, or Belle, I can't remember what her surname was now, but an English woman who had lived there for many years and helped the Brits draw up the borders. And it was basically about which tribal leaders she felt would be good, you know, easy to deal with. So, yeah.
I guess people want borders for protection. Like the division between India and Pakistan, the Muslims wanted their own country because they were such a minority in India, and they felt they would be wiped out by the Hindus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Diane, you had something.
Yeah, I was just going to say India and Pakistan is an interesting exception to what I'm going to say, but it seems to me that the creation of borders has nothing to do with what's best for the people. And I'm not saying this in a political way. I'm just saying if you were to have borders that were best for the people, they would certainly probably not be anywhere near where the borders are laid out today. As you said, you know, the good example was in Nigeria and all the various tribes in Nigeria. East Africa is the same thing. You're cutting some of the countries, or some of the tribes have been cut off partway through. I mean, they've got one tribe on one side of the border, another tribe on the other side of the border. In some countries, you have mixed tribes, and that's created friction. So, you know, they're truly artificial in the sense that certainly there were reasons why they were done, and many of them were political, but certainly not for the benefit of the people. And so, do we do away with borders? Yeah, but then how do you? I'm not sure what you do without borders. You know.
Yeah.
Philosophically, I don't know. I kind of have this deep sense that there has to be something there. I'm not sure why. You know, I still don't know why. I guess there has to be some limits as to what people can do, and maybe that's part of limiting a border, setting a border. But I'm not sure what's the criteria for if you were going to actually. It's a good question. If you were going to set criteria for how borders should be laid out, what would it be? You know, what should it be? And certainly is nowhere near what it is now, or why they were created, you know, in the past. Anyways, it's so artificial, and it's really not for the benefit of the people.
Linda.
But what's interesting is, let's go to Western Europe where things seem to be a little more calm, and you've got Spain, and you've got the Catalan, and you've got the Basque, and you got Southern Spain, and then you got everybody else, sort of. And Italy's the same way. They all are, and really can't call them tribes, but they're all the city-states who were combined in the last couple hundred years, who still view themselves as city-states.
Yep.
So, can you really not have borders if the Catalan really don't want to be Spanish? Yeah, I don't know.
Wow.
The other thing is, when you remove borders, that means there's people that are going to be losing their jobs. Presidents of countries, governors.
Yeah.
Who wants to say, take my job? I'm going for that. I don't think that's what.
And can we function as a society without some kind of organization to guide us?
Great. Okay, good. That's good discussion. It is something to ponder. One of the things, in terms of exploration, do you think we should return to the moon and head to the stars? I mean, to Mars, of course. Recently, we've had a lot of the news about the Mars exploration. Do you think that there's this restlessness, the need to wander is inherent in humans? And how does modern life limit the ambitious people, the ambitious souls of adventurous people? And what opportunities and advantages does it offer today? What do we do for the adventurous soul in terms of exploration? Any thoughts on? And we can skip over that question. Nobody has any thoughts on?
Everybody has their own what is adventure.
Oh, yeah.
An adventure for me is going to a restaurant 2 towns over I've never been to.
Okay.
Really, you can define your adventure depending on what you're looking for. I love that we're at Mars, and I love going back to the moon, but I like going to places in the United States I haven't seen before, because for me, that's an adventure. It's new to me. It may not be new to a lot of people, but it's new to me.
And I think you bring up a really good point, because is the adventurous person the one who's going out and satisfying that adventurous spirit, or is it someone who's out to go conquer unknown lands? And so there's a sort of a dichotomy between those two that's very different.
I think the curiosity piece, I agree with Carolyn, the curiosity piece, I think is critical to this. Just remaining curious about whatever it is.
My fear about the moon or Mars is we'll do to it what we've done to our own planet. I wholeheartedly agree with the idea of exploration and curiosity and wanting to know what's there. But I fear the next step will be colonization and arguments over who knows what, who owns what and who gets the resources and so on, and we'll just do so much damage to what's out there.
One of the things that Kate explains that she set off because she wanted to seek out the world's wilderness. What did you learn about the wilderness? And have you ever spent any time in the wilderness? And if you did, where did you go and what was that experience like? And did the trip teach you anything about yourself? Yeah, Pauline.
Well, I would like to go back a second before I go forward. We were talking about going places and beyond borders, and in the novel, or in the travel book on page 141, she says, we're only here by fluke and only for a little while. So why not run with life as far and wide as you can? And for her, it could be Mars. For others, it's the next town's restaurant. And I live in New York City, and it's any time I can get any place where there's green.
Yeah.
Because if you live in the middle of Manhattan, it's hard to see
green. Yeah.
Green. So to me, paradise is the Adirondack Mountains. Or my big place I've always wanted to go is Big Bend National Park. And I've never been, and I'm not sure I'll ever get there, although I've been all through Russia from the time of 91 when I was there during the coup through last year, because I've had reason to go many times. But I think everyone's place is different. And I think that this particular COVID experience has had a lot to teach us, or at least me, because when you're confined to a small area, and we don't tend to have cars in New York, so we're not going, long distance trips. You have to find your adventure close by, and it's really amazing as how many things you can find that you've passed by and just never noticed. Today I went somewhere and I looked up and there was a museum of Fotografiska. It turns out it's a branch of the Stockholm Photography Museum that has opened in New York, and it's a 6th-floor building. It's a huge place, and I never noticed it nor heard about it. Now, of course, I'll go back and they have many things. So I think going places is really how you're going. I mean, if you're in one place a long time, you can really see a lot more. And the person who liked all the restaurants, the next time, please come. We have them every block, many, where you're living. So going to a restaurant is no longer a treat, it's a way of life. And now that they're all outdoors since the COVID, it's something you do. But I think seeing nature, for me, wherever I travel, many years ago, I went to Puerto Rico, not so many years ago, and we took a friend and I took a car and we went on a camping trip all over. And when I read this book, I couldn't help thinking, because she talked about your people inviting her into their homes in Turkey. And we went and it was late at night and we stopped and we put the tent on what turned out in the morning to be a farm. When I got out, I looked, there was like oxen in front of me. And the person who owns the farm came down from the high hill with the farmhouse, and she came with coffee in thermoses and told us where we could find a spring to take a bath in and to pick things, the oranges from her trees. And so I think that people in smaller places where just seem to be able to be more open. We ended up in a fishing camp and the people told us, oh, you can sleep in one of the boats if you like. And I mean, I think it's harder to have that kind of feeling in places that are more crowded, whether it's St. Petersburg or New York, Buenos Aires. You're not going to have that same sense as she found in these small, I mean, she was not going by and large to major cities. She was going to places that were small. And someone said at the beginning, they wished she talked more about people she met and things. I thought, considering the people, whenever she ran into them, she did tell you about going into the house where it was cold outside and roasting inside. And I couldn't think, in Russia, that's the way it is also, as I remember, in the winter, the small towns, it's freezing outside and you go inside and it's like 90 degrees. And so I think, her perspective and her thoughts about herself were really, I thought I'd love to meet her, was my reaction. And I loved the way she wrote. I mean, she's a scientist, she's not a writer, but she's really a good observer. And I think that's where her scientific background comes out, and you see things with her that you might not. I thought this is a wonderful book. I lived every moment, and it forces you to slow down, because that's the one question I have for everybody here, and I don't know, this is my first time here, is I'm not quite sure what purpose Mel serves. and why she wanted to go on the trip. She doesn't seem a happy camper most of the time. And, I wonder why she didn't leave. She doesn't want to be cold. She doesn't want to be wet. She has her Kindle with her or whatever, her electronic book. What if it needs to be charged? They never mention. Maybe someone knows what purpose she serves in the book.
It's interesting. Because it is a true story. It was her childhood friend from years and years. And I think maybe part of it is just not wanting to go on that trip entirely by herself. She wasn't ready to go on her own, totally on her own. Yeah, Jan.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I had great admiration for Mel, that she put up with, Kate, and this was Kate's vision and stuff. And Mel seemed to me to just kind of go along and, take things more lightly. And I don't know, I thought she was a great friend and a good travel companion.
Isn't it nice to have a sidekick that will go with you?
Yes.
Who will just go with you. That's a wonderful thing to be and to have.
Yeah.
And it helps that Mel was more of an extrovert. Maybe we didn't get the people part, but maybe Mel did.
Yep, could be. Has anybody else been? Pauline has been out camping in Puerto Rico or in Latin America, but anybody else been out camping in the wilderness and had an experience like that?
Texas, but that's not wilderness.
Well, yurts in Mongolia.
Pardon me, yurts where?
Sleeping in a yurt in the Gobi Desert in Mongolia.
That counts.
Experience. It was, I'd say in Fahrenheit, it was about 100 and some degrees during the day, and everything, all the water froze in the yurt every night. That was quite the experience.
One of the things I have found when I've been out in the wilderness camping, in back in the days when I used to do a lot of backpacking, which has been quite a few years ago, but I always think about when you're out in the wilderness by yourself or with one or two other people. First of all, you're vulnerable to the elements, but secondly, I always think about this sense of I am here on the earth, and how do I take care of myself? And I'm not sure the right way to explain it, but it's just, it is a very much a time of self-reflection when you're out in the wilderness, where what you do is to allow yourself to live. You're waking, somebody once told me, my waking hours, I am doing things to allow myself to live. And when you're in the wilderness, that's a lot of times what you do. You're looking for water, you're looking for food, you're looking for kindling, for fire. Much of what you do is to exist. And so it provides a totally different way of self-reflection. Well, with that, we're almost out of time. We've had a good discussion. I think a lot of good discussion tonight. Any other last thoughts that people have before I turn it back to Caroline? Yeah, Nancy.
I just wanted to say, I could have typed it in, but I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Berla Murphy, but she's rather a favorite of mine, a travel writer, and I read about her about 40 years ago. She's Irish. When she was 10, she got a bicycle and an atlas for her birthday, and she never got to go anywhere till she was 35, and she had cared for her mother, and her mother died. So she rode a bicycle to India from Ireland, and this was in the 60s, early 60s. And she's amazing, and she's about 90 now, and she has continued to write books and to travel for about 50 years on a bicycle, almost always, and then even with a daughter and stuff. So anyway, check her out, Berla Murphy.
Okay, very
I've
good.
read several of her books. Very good.
One of the things also.
Type in her name, please.
Berla Murphy. I put it in the chat.
Okay.
One of the things that also reminds me, we do have the next couple of months lined up, but after that, we are open for ideas and suggestions. So if you have books that you think would be good for us to use on the book club, please send those in to us. We do want to make sure, we want your input into what books we're using. This is your club. It's not our club. It's all of our club. So anybody who has good books, the idea we're looking for is something. It doesn't have to be a travel writer. It can be, as many of you have been on calls for a while, a lot of times there are novels set in a different country, but it either has to be a travel, it has to be about another country, and by a female writer.
And let me just go through the next couple books. So May is Morocco to Timbuktu. I'll put the link in the chat as well. Morocco to Timbuktu, an Arabian Adventure by Alice Morrison. June is An Embarrassment of Mangoes, a Caribbean interlude by Anne Vanderhoof. And July is A House in Corfu by Emma Tennant. On our last call, we talked about putting together a book box, which we did announce a few weeks ago. I'm not sure if any of you have taken advantage of that yet, but it gives you all 3 books together, and some other items in the book. In the box, what I would say is I think it's quite cost effective for people with a US dollar exchange, but I'm not sure it's the greatest for Canadians. I tried to order it myself and the shipping was $45.
Whoa.
So, yes. And Cindy at the Wordy Traveler has told me that the shipping costs between Canada and the US have just gone through the roof. So that's a bit out of our control, but if you are in the US, I think it's worth looking at. And then there is also a form on our website in the book club page, which is where the books are listed and where you can suggest other books if you'd like to do that, or you're more than welcome to just email me with any of your suggestions. And what we'll do is we'll put together a bit of a poll and get everyone to vote on what books they'd like to do for the rest of the year. And that way we'll have your input. And what we're trying to do is make sure that they're available in different formats and that kind of thing, both on ebook and on paperback, so that so everyone has time to read them. But what I'd love to do is get everything set for the rest of the year, and hopefully in the summer. So thank you for all those suggestions. And I have sorry, one more thing to ask. If each of you on this call could send me one tip via email of a place you visited in the Silk Route, a museum, a hotel, a place to see, anything at all, a city to visit, I would love that, because that will help everyone in our community if they want to choose to go to any of these countries and give us some nice fresh tips. So if you're able to do that, I would really appreciate it. It will just take you a minute to type me, editor@JourneyWoman.com. And the last thing I want to say is we have a social tomorrow night. It's at 7 p.m. Eastern. If you're able to come, we're just going to have a little social chat together and share some news and reflect on the past year and have some singing by Joy. If you were at our holiday social, Joy is going to sing, and Nadine is going to be our host if you were at our Valentine's Day event. So trying to kind of, lift spirits up as we look forward into the future. And then next week we have an event on packing tips with a packing tips expert. So still a few things happening on. We're going to pause our events in June and take a little time off.
Not book club. We're going to keep up with book club.
But not the book club. We'll keep the book club going, and also our community calls, which happen every Friday morning. So anyways, I look forward to seeing you all, and thank you for making time, and always appreciate your feedback. And Wendy, thanks for doing such a great job with no camera.
Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know what happened, but I will try to get it fixed for next time.
I'm disappointed in your technical expertise after your computers. I had higher hopes. Anyways, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good evening.
Bye.